Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the show that cuts through the noise, getting straight to what you need to know. Today, we're embarking on, well, a journey into a really persistent, deep-rooted challenge. It's global, sure, but it casts this particularly long shadow over the Philippines. We're talking about the complex issue of corruption.
That's right. And it's important to frame this correctly from the start. When we talk about corruption in the Philippines based on our sources, it's way more than just, a few bad actors making headlines. It's described as a systemic feature.
Yeah.
It's deeply woven into the very fabric of governance.
And that fundamentally impedes national development, right? Erodes public trust, undermines democracy itself.
Precisely. It touches everything.
And the numbers, wow, they really underscore this challenge, don't they? If you look at Transparency International's 2024 Corruption Perceptions Index, the CPI, the Philippines scores a pretty low 33 out of 100. And remember, 0 means highly corrupt. 100 is very clean.
Yeah, 33 is not good. It places them 114th out of 180 countries.
Mm.
That's well below the global average and the Asia-Pacific average, too.
And it's not just external perception. How do Filipinos themselves see it?
Well, public sentiment really mirrors these figures. The Global Corruption Barometer found that a staggering 86% of Filipinos see government corruption as a significant national problem.
86%, that's almost universal agreement. It's huge.
It really is. There's a clear consensus on the scale of the issue.
So our mission today is to go beyond just the anecdotes, the headlines. We want to actually map out what our sources call this architecture of impunity. We're going to dig into the sophisticated tactics, the concealment, the financial, obfuscation.
And the systemic weaknesses in the justice system that kind of allow corruption to thrive.
Exactly. And then the big question, is a corruption-free future for the Philippines truly within reach? Let's start our deep dive.
Okay, so to really get why corruption persists, we need to grasp its systemic nature. Social science tells us systemic corruption isn't just about individual greed, though that's part of it, obviously. It endures because it actually serves an integral function within the political and governance system. It's deeply embedded in the structures.
That's a key insight, isn't it? It means you can prosecute low-ranking officials, maybe make some headlines.
Right. But if the underlying system, what some sources call the business of politics, remains untouched, then it just continues. The problem isn't solved.
That completely reframes the problem. And these roots, they go way back in history.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking origins stretching back to the Spanish colonial period. But it really reached what's been called an institutionalized zenith during Ferdinand Marcos's authoritarian rule.
Right, the Marcos dictatorship. The estimates are, what, $5 to $13 billion plundered?
That's the range often cited.
Yeah.
And that era set this dangerous precedent for impunity, for cronyism, that still echoes today. You can draw a line.
And the methods have changed over time, too.
Definitely evolved.
Right.
From, simpler nepotism and smuggling in the past, we've seen it morph into highly sophisticated public work scams, complex debt finance schemes, even the outright capture of state assets.
Capture of state assets, like treating public resources as a private piggy bank.
Essentially, yes, where public functions are subverted for private gain on a massive scale.
The consequences are just devastating. Our sources estimate as much as 20% of the entire national budget lost to corruption annually.
And over 20 years, that calculation comes out to something like US $48 billion.
$48 billion. Just think about the roads, the hospitals, the schools that money could have funded.
Exactly. Those economic losses translate directly into stunted growth, underdevelopment, political instability, and it corrodes social values too, Makes people cynical.
And the most tragic part really is which projects get targeted.
That's the kicker. It's often the projects with the greatest potential public impact. Health, education, poverty alleviation. They become prime targets. So vital resources get diverted from the very citizens who need them most. It's a direct hit on human development.
Okay, so with that systemic context, let's zoom in. Let's break down how this corruption actually looks, how it operates. Our sources categorize it. First up, grand corruption.
Right. This is the big stuff. High-level officials, vast sums of money, often involving organized syndicates, the plunder. There's actually a law, Republic Act 7080, that defines it amassing at least $50 million in ill-gotten wealth. That's about, what, almost $1 million US?
Yeah, roughly. And the examples are infamous, aren't they?
Absolutely. The estimated $10 billion linked to the Marcos family is the classic case, but also the massive $10 billion Priority Development Assistance Fund scam, the pork barrel scam.
I remember that one vividly.
And others, like the fertilizer fund scandal, the NBN-ZTE deals, these aren't just isolated incidents. They show systematic diversion of public funds, a sophisticated criminal enterprise, really.
Then, at the other end of the spectrum, there's petty corruption.
This is what ordinary people, ordinary businesses bump into more often. The grease money, locally called lagay, paying a little extra to speed up routine services, get permits, avoid bureaucratic red tape.
And it's widespread.
Very. One study found 72% of businesses reported being asked for a bribe just for taxes or licenses.
72%.
Yeah. And the real insight here isn't just the individual amounts, which might be small, is how it normalizes bribery. It chips away at the public's moral compass, makes corruption feel like this unavoidable, almost normal part of daily life.
That's corrosive. Okay, what's next?
Patronage politics, often called the Padrino system.
Yes, the who you know system.
Exactly. It's this deeply ingrained cultural and political practice, using personal connections, nepotism for family, cronyism for friends and allies to get favors, promotions, appointments. Merit takes a backseat.
And the insight here goes beyond just favoritism.
Right. It's how this cultural practice has become a structural vulnerability. It creates these powerful loyalty networks. And these networks can actively protect corrupt activities, shield people from accountability. It undermines professionalism, makes meritocracy incredibly difficult.
Any examples jump out?
Well, the Kamaganak, Inc., or Relatives, Incorporated scandal during the Corazon Aquino administration is often cited as a stark example of how quickly these networks can form even after reforms.
And this patronage, it must feed directly into elections.
Directly into electoral corruption. The cost of running for office in the Philippines is incredibly high. Our sources describe elections almost as contests of money and celebrity.
So candidates spend huge amounts, advertising, vote buying.
Exactly. Massive spending. And then if they win, public office is often viewed, cynically perhaps, as an investment to be recouped.
Which creates immense pressure to find illicit funds. Kickbacks, basically.
Precisely. To pay off campaign debts and critically to build a war chest for the next election. It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle.
And the pork barrel scam was a prime example of funding that cycle.
Absolutely. That systematic abuse of discretionary funds like the PDAF, where legislators allegedly receive kickbacks, sometimes up to 50% of a project's value, that was a core mechanism for this recoupment.
And it's still happening.
The pattern seems to persist. Look at the recent controversy around the 2024-2025 flood control projects. Allegations of overpriced contracts, even invented projects, specifically linked to paying off campaign jets.
Wow. Okay, and the last category.
Institutional corruption. This is maybe more subtle. It's the systemic misuse of discretionary funds or even just standard institutional processes for personal or political gain.
Like bending the rules from the inside.
Kind of. A striking example was the Pavaman scandal in the armed forces. Retiring chiefs of staff were allegedly given millions of pesos as a send-off gift, Paban, from unaudited funds. It shows how corruption can become embedded, almost normalized, within the very rules and routines of an institution.
Okay, so we have these different types. Now, where are they most prevalent? Which sectors are most vulnerable?
Public procurement and infrastructure. That's a big one. Particularly the Department of Public Works and Highways, the DPWH. It's perennially perceived as one of the most corrupt agencies.
What kind of schemes happen there?
Classic ones include ghost projects. Money is allocated, paperwork filed for, say, a road or a bridge, but it literally never gets built. The project only exists on paper.
The money just vanishes.
Essentially, yes, diverted. Overpricing of contracts is also rampant, with kickbacks reportedly sometimes as high as 25%.
And is it fragmented or more organized?
Sources suggest it could be quite organized. They mention a small cabal of favored contractors often controlling a lot of the government work, sometimes through license renting, where large accredited firms lease their licenses to smaller, maybe unqualified ones, often connected to politicians.
Which centralizes control and makes it easier for, say, political dynasties to channel funds.
Exactly. As alleged in that huge $545.6 billion 2024-2025 flood control projects controversy we mentioned, links to political families funneling contracts to their own companies.
Okay, where else is high risk?
The revenue collection agencies. The Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR for taxes, and the Bureau of Customs, BOC for tariffs, both are notoriously corrupt.
What goes on there? Both big and small stuff.
Yeah, both. Grand syndicates involved in large-scale smuggling or tax evasion, but
Mm.
also petty bribery, embezzlement, extortion, irregular payments needed just to get goods cleared through customs. Rampant smuggling, underinvoicing, tax evasion, it all costs the state billions every year in lost revenue.
How bad is the perception?
So bad that the business community consistently rates the commitment of these agencies to fighting their own internal corruption as poor or even very bad. That speaks volumes.
Ouch. And law enforcement.
Law enforcement and military aren't immune, sadly. The
Hmm.
police are widely seen as one of the most corrupt institutions. Officers allegedly engage in extortion, local protection rackets, even drug trafficking. It's so bad that over half of all businesses pay for private security rather than relying on the police.
That's a damning statistic.
It is. And as we noted, the military has had its own issues, like the pay band scandal, showing institutionalized problems.
But maybe the most critical piece, the linchpin for impunity.
Critically, yes, the judiciary. If the courts don't work properly, nothing else matters much in terms of accountability. And sources say it's heavily influenced by the rich and powerful. Favorable decisions allegedly secured through bribes, through patronage networks, irregular payments.
Which undermines the whole concept of fairness.
Completely.
Yeah.
It leads to biased decisions. Justice is notoriously slow. Investment disputes can take years, even decades to resolve. Low judicial salaries are often flagged as a key vulnerability here, making judges and court personnel more susceptible to temptation.
So it really does sound like a vicious cycle.
It absolutely is.
Hmm.
Corruption in, say, revenue collection limits the funds available for the justice system.
Which then makes the justice system itself weaker and more vulnerable to corruption.
Exactly. This interconnected, self-perpetuating system is precisely why dismantling it is so incredibly difficult. It's not just a series of independent failures, but a deeply interwoven systemic problem.
Okay, we've painted a pretty bleak picture so far. I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all.
It is daunting, no question.
But understanding the problem, really mapping it out, that's the first step towards maybe changing it. Which brings us to the core mystery of this deep dive. If corruption is so pervasive, so costly, why does it feel like, as our sources say, no one gets to jail? Especially the big fish.
Right. This is the very essence of that architecture of impunity we mentioned. How do corrupt actors systematically evade justice?
Let's break that down.
Okay. The problem, as you hinted, is really twofold. First, there's sophisticated concealment of the crimes themselves. And second, there are systemic failures within the justice system when cases do get filed.
So let's start with concealment. Hiding the crime, hiding the money.
Corrupt actors use a whole toolbox of tactics to hide their activities and the illicit wealth they gain. Makes them incredibly hard to trace.
Top of the list must be things like shell companies.
Absolutely. Shell corporations and fake NGOs. These are legal entities, technically, but they exist only on paper. They're used purely to channel public funds while maintaining this facade of legitimacy.
Like in the pork barrel scam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Janet Lynn Naples, the alleged mastermind, set up this vast network of bogus NGOs. She even listed her own employees infamously. Even her family's nanny is the official incorporators on paper.
Unbelievable.
These fake NGOs would then claim they were implementing projects, often non-existent ghost projects, and the funds would just be diverted directly into private pockets.
And this concealment often goes international, right?
Oh, yes. Through offshore accounts and tax havens. The Marcos family were pioneers here, using false names like William Saunders and Jane Ryan, setting up Liechtenstein foundations way back in 1968 to hide assets at banks like Credit Suisse.
And it's still common.
Very much so. More recently, big investigations like the ICIJ's Pandora Papers linked prominent Filipino politicians, people like Amy Marcos, Senator Manny Villar, to offshore accounts and entities in places like the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Singapore.
Which makes it incredibly difficult for Philippine authorities to track, let alone recover, stolen wealth.
Extremely difficult, often beyond their practical reach and resources without significant international cooperation.
So for investigators trying to follow the money, it must feel like navigating an impossible financial maze.
It really is. They employ complex money laundering trails. Take Major General Carlos Garcia, accused of embezzling over $300 million. The funds were allegedly laundered through real estate purchases, through foreign bank accounts held by family members. It gets complicated fast.
And the PDAF scam money.
Same thing. Funds quickly withdrawn, split among conspirators. Some were even transferred to U.S. bank accounts to buy assets, a Ritz-Carlton condo, a Porsche Boxster for Niples' daughter. Fancy stuff. bought with public money.
And vulnerabilities in the system itself get exploited.
Definitely. The 2016 Bangladesh bank heist really exposed that. $81 million stolen electronically, funneled through Philippine banks and, crucially, casinos. At the time, casinos weren't fully covered by anti-money laundering regulations. That loophole has since been tightened, but it shows how criminals exploit gaps.
And all this requires help, right? It's not just one person.
Absolutely relies on layering, forgery, and official complicity. These schemes need networks. The PDAF scam, for example, required cooperation from officials inside the Department of Budget and Management to actually release the funds based on fraudulent requests.
And they create false paper trails?
Often, yes. Forging signatures of unsuspecting local mayors or governors on project documents to make everything look above board. It's a whole coordinated network of deception designed to make the crime virtually untraceable.
Okay, so the concealment is incredibly sophisticated. But let's say investigators do manage to pierce that veil, piece together a case. What happens then? Why do so many cases still seem to collapse in the justice system?
Well, even when a case makes it to court, the path to conviction is, frankly, riddled with systemic obstacles. First, you often have weak investigations and prosecutions. The Office of the Ombudsman, which is supposed to be the primary anti-graft agency, struggles. Sources point to a shortage of skilled prosecutors, poor coordination with law enforcement.
Which means the cases going to court might be weak from the start?
Often, yes. They get filed with incomplete evidence, maybe evidence that's inadmissible in court due to procedural errors. Essentially, they're set up for failure before the trial even really begins.
That's a fundamental flaw right there. And then the courts themselves.
Then you get to the issue of a compromised and politicized judiciary. Despite its formal independence on paper, sources consistently say it's heavily influenced by the wealthy and powerful. Bribes, patronage networks playing a role.
And political appointments matter.
Empirical studies suggest they do. They show that Supreme Court justices' voting patterns often align, especially early in their tenure, with the president who appointed them. That kind of politicization absolutely erodes impartiality and, just as importantly, public confidence in the rule of law.
Now, there's a special court, the Sandigan-Van, meant to handle these cases, right?
Yes, the Sandigan-Van.
Yeah.
It's the specialized anti-graft court. It was specifically created to be the front line in fighting high-level corruption, to expedite these cases.
But has it worked out that way?
Ironically, it's often become a symbol of the justice system's failures, a significant bottleneck. Cases drag on for an average of 7 years, some take decades.
Which benefits the accused, presumably.
Especially those with resources.
Absolutely. They can afford top lawyers, employ delaying tactics, basically outlast the prosecution, and the court has a history of acquitting high-profile individuals.
Why? What are the recurring reasons for these acquittals? Several patterns emerge from the sources. Often there's a failure to prove conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution might show someone signed documents, but they struggle to establish that community of conscious and criminal design, that everyone was knowingly in on the scheme together.
So connecting the dots legally is hard?
Very hard. Then there's the issue of inadmissible or weak evidence. For instance, in the high-profile plunder case against Senator Enrile related to the PDAF scam, key ledgers detailing payments were deemed inadmissible because they were unsigned photocopies. A key witness couldn't recall specific amounts under cross-examination. Technicalities like these can sink a case.
And then there's that procedural move, the demur to evidence. That sounds quite technical, but it seems really significant.
It is highly significant and perhaps frustrating for the public. It's a motion the defense can file after the prosecution rests its case. They argue that even if you believe all the prosecution's evidence, it's still legally insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
And if the Sandigan-Van agrees?
If the court grants the demur, it's legally equivalent to an acquittal. And because of the constitutional right against double jeopardy being tried twice for the same crime, that decision is final and unappealable.
So it's a very effective escape hatch for the accused, especially the well-resourced ones.
An incredibly effective escape route.
And finally, you mentioned whistleblowers being crucial. What about the witness protection program?
That's identified as a deeply flawed system. And this feels like a critical failure because you're right, without protected witnesses, proving these complex conspiracy cases is nearly impossible.
What are the flaws?
A major one is that the witness protection program is administered by the Department of Justice, DOJ.
Yeah.
Now imagine you're a whistleblower testifying against a high-ranking official, maybe even someone within the DOJ or closely allied with it. That creates a massive potential conflict of interest. Can you really trust the system to protect you?
That's a huge barrier.
It is. Plus, the program is reportedly chronically under-resourced. Inadequate financial support for witnesses who often have to leave their jobs, relocate their families, and crucially, sources say there's often no interim protection provided while your application to the program is being processed. That leaves witnesses terrifyingly vulnerable to intimidation, threats, or even violence right when they need protection most.
Which must deter potential whistleblowers from even coming forward.
Absolutely. It directly contributes to that lack of evidence problem that leads to acquittals. It completes the circle of impunity, really.
So it's this heartbreaking paradox, isn't it? The very legal safeguards designed to protect the innocent, like needing proof beyond a reasonable doubt, protection against double jeopardy, they get weaponized by the corrupt in a compromised system. They become escape routes.
Precisely. Rather than shields for the innocent, they become loopholes for the guilty who know how to exploit the system's weaknesses.
And the international dimension we touched on earlier, that makes it even harder.
It really does. Domestic agencies often just lack the resources, the jurisdiction, the international agreements needed to effectively tackle global financial secrecy. The Marcos regime's global network of hidden assets, the fact that it is the U.S. Department of Justice that seized some PDAF scam assets laundered in America, the revelations from the Pandora Papers, it all highlights that fighting grand corruption today is fundamentally an international financial crime issue.
It requires global cooperation, not just purely domestic efforts.
Exactly. You can't solve it entirely from within the Philippines alone.
Wow. Okay, that is a truly sobering picture of how this architecture of impunity works. It highlights a formidable, almost overwhelming challenge. But, on this show, we always aim to offer more than just diagnosis. We look for the so what and the what next. So the crucial question now is, given all this complexity, all these deep-rooted issues, is a corruption-free future truly within reach for the Philippines? Where do we possibly go from here?
It's the vital question, isn't it? And while the picture is daunting, sources stress it's far from hopeless. Meaningful reform pathways do exist. Many are already being pursued, actually. But it requires a really multi-pronged approach. You need top-down institutional strengthening, combined with bottom-up, citizen-led accountability. You need to strategically leverage international pressure, and crucially, learn from what's worked and hasn't worked elsewhere in the region.
Okay, let's break that down. Starting with top-down reforms. What are the key institutional changes needed?
Our sources highlight legislative and procurement reform as absolutely key. There's a new Government Procurement Act, Republic Act 12,009, just enacted in 2024. Some are calling it a potential game changer.
What does it do?
It aims to institutionalize electronic procurement, making things more transparent. It pushes for open contracting principles. And critically, it requires beneficial ownership disclosure for companies bidding on projects.
So finding out who really owns the company getting the contract.
Exactly, making it much harder to hide behind layers of shell corporations if you know who the ultimate beneficial owner is. That's potentially huge.
But implementation is key, right? A law is only as good as its enforcement.
Entirely. Success hinges completely on rigorous implementation and sustained political will to enforce it, not just having the law in the books.
Beyond new laws, what about strengthening the institutions that investigate and prosecute?
Yeah, enhancing prosecutorial and investigative capacity is vital. International partners like the IDLO, the UNODC, are actually providing technical assistance. Training for prosecutors in the Ombudsman's Office and the Department of Justice, focusing on things like advanced trial advocacy, forensic accounting, complex financial investigation skills you absolutely need for these big, complicated cases.
And judicial reform, fixing the courts.
That's ongoing too, though maybe slower. The Supreme Court has created an internal body, the Judiciary Integrity Board, JIB, aiming for internal accountability, handling complaints against judges and staff. There are also discussions about procedural reforms in the Sandig and beyond, like adopting continuous trials to try and combat those excessive delays we talked about.
But the deeper challenge remains.
The deeper challenge is how to truly insulate the judiciary from political patronage, especially the appointment process for judges and justices. That's a much tougher nut to crack.
And on the money side, financial transparency and anti-money laundering.
International pressure is actually a big driver here. Being on the FATF gray list, the Financial Action Task Force list of countries under increased monitoring for money laundering risks, creates powerful incentives for reform. Nobody wants to be on that list.
So it pushes the government to act.
It does. It's pushing for things like a more comprehensive whistleblower protection law, one that actually works and protects people. And for robust, beneficial ownership transparency laws across the board, not just in procurement. The aim is to make hiding illicit assets significantly harder, closing those financial secrecy loopholes.
Okay, that's the top-down stuff. What about bottom-up accountability? The power of citizens, of collective action?
This is incredibly important. Investigative journalism plays a huge role. Think about the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, the PCIJ. Their expose on then-President Joseph Estrada's unexplained wealth directly provided the basis for his impeachment back in 2001.
That's a massive impact for journalism, a watchdog role.
Absolutely. And they, along with other outlets, continue that watchdog role, participating in global exposés like the Pandora Papers.
Then there's citizen monitoring.
Yes, citizen monitoring and social accountability, often led by civil society organizations, CSOs. Programs like Government Watch, or G-Watch, have this interesting collaborative model. They actually sign Memoranda of Agreement, MOAs, with government agencies like the DPWH or the Department of Education.
What does that allow them to do?
It gives trained citizen monitors formal access to project sites, to documents. They can observe, provide feedback directly to the agency, flag potential issues early on. It's not just complaining after the fact, it's structured oversight built into the process.
But that sounds effective. Are there examples at the local level, too?
Definitely. The Naga City People's Council, NCPC, is a widely recognized model of success. It's legitimized by a city ordinance, which is key. This council, a federation of local NGOs and people's organizations, has the right to send representatives to all city government committees.
And they have real power there.
They participate and they vote in the planning, implementation, and evaluation of city projects and policies. It's institutionalized citizen participation, and it's widely credited for Naga City's long-standing reputation for good governance and transparency. It shows that formally embedding citizen power can work.
That's really encouraging. Any other bottom-up approaches?
Even things like the Gallingpook Awards play a role. They provide positive incentives. They celebrate and promote innovative, effective local governance programs from different LGUs, local government units. This encourages replication, spreading best practices across the country. It fosters a culture of positive competition based on good governance.
And underlying all this is the need for broader public engagement.
Absolutely. Public mobilization and cultural shift. History shows it matters. The 1986 ADSA People Power Revolution against Marcos's kleptocracy is the ultimate example that massive, collective citizen action can bring about change, even against seemingly entrenched power.
So the call is for sustained vigilance.
Sustained public vigilance, yes. A collective refusal to normalize corruption, even the petty legae, and a consistent, loud demand for accountability from leaders. Culture change is slow, but vital.
Now, you mentioned learning from neighbors. What can the Philippines learn from regional counterparts?
Well, Indonesia's Corruption Eradication Commission, the KPK, is an interesting case. For a time, it was seen as a gold standard. It had extraordinary powers to investigate, prosecute, even wiretap without needing a court order initially. And it had an almost 100% conviction rate for the high-level officials it prosecuted. It showed what a truly independent, powerful anti-corruption body can achieve if given the mandate and backing.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. It's also a warning. The KPK was systematically weakened over time through legislative amendments pushed by politicians who felt threatened by it and became vulnerable to political backlash.
A cautionary tale. Anti-corruption bodies need continuous protection to survive.
Exactly. They are always vulnerable to pushback from the very people they target. Other countries offer different lessons. Malaysia, for instance, introduced a corporate liability provision.
Holding companies responsible.
Yes, holding directors and management criminally liable if an employee engages in corruption, unless the company can prove it had adequate procedures in place to prevent it. That puts the onus on companies to clean up their act.
And transparency.
Both Malaysia and Thailand are making strides in enhancing beneficial ownership transparency, trying to eliminate those financial hiding places we discussed. Everyone is grappling with this.
So if we pull all these threads together, top-down, bottom-up, international learning, our sources talk about a powerful sandwich effect. What exactly does that mean?
It means the most successful anti-corruption strategies seem to be those that combine robust, top-down institutional reforms, stronger laws, better enforcement, independent courts with equally strong institutionalized bottom-up citizen oversight.
Like the Naga City example, where citizen power is formally built into the system.
Precisely. It's not just one or the other, it's both, working together, creating systems of shared power and mutual accountability by design. That's the sandwich.
And international pressure helps squeeze that sandwich.
Right. International pressure, whether through things like the UN Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, the FATF Gray List, or partnerships with bodies like the US DOJ, acts as a critical external lever. It provides incentives and sometimes the technical means to drive domestic reform, adding weight to those internal top-down and bottom-up efforts.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've covered a lot of ground today. We've embarked on this journey, mapping out a pretty sobering landscape. Systemic corruption in the Philippines, sustained by this complex architecture of impunity. It's built on sophisticated concealment tactics and a justice system with some profound vulnerabilities. It's a complex, deeply entrenched problem.
It is. But as we've also seen, that sobering picture is incomplete if we don't acknowledge the resilience, the ongoing efforts, and the real pathways forward. The Philippines has a history of successfully challenging corruption. Think EDSA revolution. Think the groundbreaking work of the PCIJ. Think the local governance model of Naga City. Change isn't just possible, it has actually been achieved time and again through persistent, dedicated effort.
So the path forward, it seems, requires a kind of new national consensus against corruption, one that really transcends political divides. It demands genuine political will. And that means more than just rhetoric, right? It means concrete, often politically costly actions, things like real campaign finance reform, seriously addressing the issue of political dynasties.
And public officials genuinely severing conflicting business ties. Walking the talk.
It also needs institutional fortitude.
Yes. Truly insulating the judiciary, the ombudsman, law enforcement from political pressure, giving them the resources, the training, and crucially, the independence they need to do their jobs without fear or favor. And, as we discussed, a fundamental reform of the witness protection program is absolutely critical to making it genuinely credible and effective. People need to trust they'll be safe if they speak out.
And finally, it needs unwavering public vigilance.
This might be the most important piece. You, as citizens, alongside civil society organizations, alongside a free and probing media, you are the nation's immune system against corruption, exposing wrongdoing, consistently monitoring government actions, holding leaders accountable, and crucially, refusing to normalize corruption, refusing to accept even the petty legacy as just the way things are. That is absolutely essential.
So the fight against corruption, it's a long haul.
It's a long generational struggle for democratic integrity.
Yeah.
It is absolutely arduous. Setbacks are inevitable, as the KPK example shows. But the evidence suggests that with the strategic combination, structural reform from the top, international partnership, and relentless, empowered citizen engagement from the bottom, it is a fight that can be won. Progress can definitely be made.
And maybe our final thought for you, the listener. Just by engaging with this, by seeking to understand the complexities we've discussed today, you're already playing a part. You're part of that informed, vigilant citizenry that's essential for driving change. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.